From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the End Report Husker Show.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Bill Rentschler in the 1011 Now streaming studio, joined as always by sports director Kevin Sjuts for another edition of the End Report Husker Show. Kevin, I shudder to even think that we are just less than 2 weeks away from the 2024 football opener. Time has just moved too quickly.
Are you wearing a burnt orange shirt?
John Cook would be disappointed.
Because they're a week away, and I don't think Cook would approve that shirt.
No, John Cook would be very disappointed. He would kick me right out of the press conference if he was here. So
yeah, because they're coming up too.
They are.
Nebraska football, Nebraska volleyball. Next week it gets real.
It does.
And it's been a long August of training and talking and learning. We're about to play some games here, Bill.
The rubber is about to meet the road, as they would say again. Football again opens against UTEP August 31st. Volleyball, the AVCA poll just came out. They're number 2 in the AVCA poll. Texas, again, the burnt orange is number 1. There's been a ton of storylines this offseason, all of them kind of coming to a head here probably in the next week to 10 days. I wanted to start real quick, Kevin, though. Again, I know a lot of people have chosen to forgot about it, but 5-7 last year. The big story, obviously, for the football team was the quarterbacks and cycling through multiple quarterbacks, 31 turnovers, finishing minus 17 in the turnover margin.
Okay, where's the positivity here? You're bringing up all the bad stuff.
All the bad stuff.
I'm going to tell you this.
That's the low. We can only go up from here.
Oh, you're just you're building the basement before you show us the living room and the upstairs.
Launching from there.
Well, here's the positivity. This is not a 5-7 team.
No.
Having been to practice multiple times this training camp, I think the first I shared this pretty freely. The first time I saw this team during fall camp, I said, I think they're better, like noticeably better. But I was very guarded. The second time, it was their open scrimmage on that Saturday inside Memorial Stadium. I walked out of there going, no, that team's good. Like, I think Nebraska is a good football team. I'm not going to give you my win total. I think that's always kind of a silly exercise and it really gets you nowhere. I just go off of the eyes. And plus in college football, you lose games you're not supposed to. It's a substantially better football team. They've upgraded at some very key positions. Quarterback, of course, is the beginning and end of that discussion. Mm-hmm. Dylan Raiola is smooth. He does not look like a freshman physically. He throws a really good ball, and he's established excellent chemistry with his receivers and tight ends. And taking his offensive line out to go eat pizza at the aisles in Lincoln, that's not a bad play either.
No, that's always a good thing to do.
So
take care of the big guys.
The quarterback spot is better. The defense has emphasized taking the football away. They're now speaking 301, not 201 anymore, and that's scary to think about because that unit was so good last year, especially in stopping the run. And most of their special teams players are back, and they're healthy. Mm-hmm. If you look at the running back situation last year, there was constantly moving pieces. You know, Emmett Johnson did a really nice job for Nebraska and was the Huskers' leading rusher outside of Heinrich Harburg. But you didn't get a full season from Ramir Johnson or Gabe Irvin Jr. So that room is healthy, and there's been good competition here over the past month at the running back spot. So everything has gotten better, right?
And
not to mention better and deeper, and not to mention this staff is willing to meet the issues that plagued the team last year head on. And Matt Rule, I'm sure everybody's seen the video where he stopped the practice and gave a very passionate speech about, you know, the knucklehead things we just did. That's what equates to losses. We have to stop doing this because we're too good to not continue to make steps forward to reach our ceiling. And that ceiling, I think, for this team is really high. I'm fairly confident Nebraska is going to go to a bowl game this year. And the other part of the discussion, too, Bill, is the schedule is much different this year. It's one of the most navigatable, I don't know that that's a word, but it's maybe the easiest schedule in the Big Ten to navigate. Nebraska does not leave home until they go to Purdue, which is not the most intimidating of league road venues. And the teams that they don't have on this schedule are the teams you don't want to have on this schedule. You don't have to play Michigan. You don't have to play Oregon. You're not playing Penn State.
Open against UTEP. Colorado is probably, again, obviously the big one everyone knows about. Northern Iowa at home. Illinois at home on a Friday. So your first 4 games at home. You don't go on the road till week 5, and then you're at Purdue. Then you get Rutgers at home. Rutgers looks like it's going to be a really good team. And then you got on the road at Indiana. So that's a pretty manageable first 7 games. And then you go to Ohio State, UCLA at home, to USC, and then Wisconsin at home, and then at Iowa.
And for the folks that say Nebraska should start 7-0, let's take the word should out. Are they capable of starting 7-0? Yes. Will they be favored in each of those 7 games? More than likely. But what happens in college football that makes college football so beautiful, Bill?
Upsets.
Upset
Everywhere.
games. So even though you want to look at one of those games and say Nebraska is going to be favored in that game, which they will be, they could lose because college football's crazy. Sometimes there are players that you don't really account for that become stars in the span of one game. And sometimes you turn the ball over 5 times and you can't handle a snap. It's just too unpredictable of a sport to say Nebraska is going to go 7-0, period. So there's a word of caution, in my opinion, on the front side of the schedule. But there is a pretty good probability of Nebraska getting off to a fantastic start to begin the 2024 season. The other thing that I think to inject some optimism, and the Kool-Aid drinkers already know this, and the folks that don't always consume the Kool-Aid, maybe they are a little bit more here this August, just because of all the momentum behind the program. In the interviews that we've done between myself, Chase Madison, Kendall Lanier, the other folks that have covered this Nebraska football team in the offseason for 10-11, I think we overwhelmingly have a sense of this is a team that believes that they can win. Despite 5 last year and despite missing out on a bowl game, there is an internal belief that they're going to get it done this year. And there's a fine line here too, Bill, when you talk about the psyche of a team and the situation Nebraska is in. There could be cockiness, there could be lowliness, and in the middle there's a sweet spot of knowing potential, believing you can get it done, and then having a firm confidence that when it's time to execute, that you're going to make the play. And I think Nebraska's right in that spot. And why is that? I think it's because of the leadership of Matt Rule and this coaching staff.
And I think you saw that, obviously, foundation being laid last year. But this feels like a team, if it does hit some adversity, maybe like teams in the past 5 or 7 years or whatever, it's not just going to fold. They're going to have that, to use Matt Rule's word, what's next sort of mentality. Well,
we will find out on that. But in the situations of last year, when that adversity hit, who are the players that were on the field? And I'm not trying to disrespect anybody here. Chubba Purdy and Heinrich Harburg were playing quarterback. This year it's going to be Dylan Raiola. And adversity could really affect him too. He's a young freshman quarterback. Presumably, we still don't have the announcement he's going to be Nebraska's starting quarterback, but he's going to be Nebraska's starting quarterback. And then even some of the linemen, some of the procedural penalties should go away because these guys have another year under their belt. And at the running back spot, instead of it being a young Emmett Johnson, it's an Emmett Johnson with a year of experience and who's now comfortable playing Big Ten football in meaningful games in November. So all those things lend you to believe that when the adversity strikes that you spoke about, Bill, that these players are more equipped to handle it. And in some instances, it's going to be different players on the field.
And last year, we obviously, you don't know, but last year the injuries hit so fast and in such a huge number that you were all of a sudden diving into players like an Emmett Johnson, who was completely unproven, hadn't played a single snap of major college football. Young players like Malachi Coleman, Jalen Lloyd, now they all have that year of experience under that belt, and Rule has added to both of those rooms. You have Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nayor, and you got a whole stable of running backs. Those rooms look a lot different than what they did last year.
Yeah, and in the instance of the offensive line, Teddy Prohaska goes down with a season-ending injury early this month, and it's just terrible news. You feel awful for Teddy, who's had a malign career. But what was the level of panic when that happened? There really wasn't much of one because even though Teddy is out, and you really wish he could play this season, you have Turner Corcoran, who can slide into that spot, and he is a seasoned vet. And you have Gunnar Gatula, who's coming off a redshirt season, and the coaches have really praised Gatula, who's a Lincoln Southeast graduate, and just his growth over the course of the summer months and now during fall camp. So there wasn't much of a panic, whereas a year ago, when somebody would go down, it was an oh no feeling, and that was from the fan base, and you got a sense of that internally. Right now, I don't think you've had that oh no feeling in either regard.
No. There's a lot. They've done a good job at stockpiling a lot of talent on this team. And again, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm guessing a pretty large percentage of this team is still freshmen and sophomores. And so again, that's what you got to do. Because again, rules said it multiple times this offseason. If they want to play all the games, they're going to potentially play 16, 17 games through the playoff. You're going to need more than one quarterback who can play. You're going to need several running backs. You're going to need a deep wide receiver room.
And a lot of those sophomores, since you brought up the youth on the team, Bill, and I would also, contradict that a little bit. It's still a veteran team because you were able to get back guys like Isaac Gifford and
Ty
Robinson. Nash is playing again. So there is some outstanding veterans on this team. But to your point of the freshmen and sophomores, not only do they have sophomores on the roster, Bill, those sophomores have gotten better, because one thing we did learn in 2023 last year is that this coaching staff puts a lot of emphasis on developing players. And you look at a Cam Linhart, a Princewell Umanmielen, even identifying talent like James Williams, that they've been able to guide. Emmett Johnson's another example. Young players that get better. So if they were able to get better in the course of 3 months in season, what happened in 7 months in the off season?
Corey Campbell doesn't seem like a strength and conditioning coach that would suffer not giving 100% in those off-season drills.
Well, I think that's all strength and conditioning coaches,
Probably.
Right?
Yes.
But Corey Campbell, I think, takes it to another level.
Yes. So you're talking about freshmen. There's obviously a couple freshmen we have to keep our eye on this season. Ja'Cory Barney's one. Coach Foley talked about him today, about returning kicks. You have Vincent Shavers on the defense. Linebacker sounds like he's making noise. But obviously that conversation starts and ends with Dylan Raiola. You've been covering this team for a long, long time, Kevin. Have you ever seen a player come in with the excitement and maybe expectations like a Dylan Raiola has this season?
Quarterback or just anybody?
Just anyone.
When Marlon Lucky arrived in Lincoln, I felt like that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And the cameras were always on number 20, and that was Lucky's number at the time. He was a 5-star, and Dylan, I believe, is the highest-rated signee for Nebraska since maybe Marlon Lucky. They've had other 5-stars in between. But in terms of the fanfare and excitement that one player can generate, yeah, you have to turn the clock back quite a ways. And I think the more he has practiced and the more that the media has seen of Dylan, the more that everybody starts to believe, like, he's a special talent. And even hearing some of the players, I can recall an interview that was done with Jamal Banks before training camp started. And Jamal and Dylan went down to Florida, and they spent a week working together. And Jamal, who is, he's a grad transfer. He's seen a lot of college football already, and he's throwing with an 18-year-old. And he was pretty unfiltered about the ceiling of Dylan Raiola. I believe he used a quote to the effect of, he knows how good he can be, and he will make sure that he will be that good. And that doesn't speak to just his talent level, but also his work ethic.
Yeah,
and I think that, if I read it right, Dylan in the spring was very cautious in throwing himself front and center. And he just tried to earn the respect of his teammates through his performance, through the time he spent watching film. And then he let his actions really kind of allow his growth in terms of his value on the team. And once everybody saw him work, saw his skill set, then he started to insert himself a little bit more from a leadership standpoint and start to move to the front of the pack.
And so, it seems like he's done all the right things, said all the right things. he will struggle at some point, I would imagine, this season. He's a freshman. He's an 18-year-old. He's never played, Big Ten football. But you have to like what you see there. So, and again, like kind of I started, there's a lot of issues last year with the quarterbacks, and it seems like that's a position that should be a lot more productive.
He's just so comfortable, and he's so smooth. And we're not just saying smooth as in like these little sidearm releases he sometimes delivers the ball with, and the way that he can command traffic pre-snap. It just seems like the ball comes out of his hand very effortlessly, and there have been a few times when we've been at practice in the window we get to watch where, he's throwing the ball deep, and you don't realize how deep it's actually going. Because sometimes when you're throwing a ball that's going to travel 55, 60 yards, you see a quarterback really get his body into it.
Wind up and sling it.
Dylan is more of a foot in the ground and let it go guy. And it just doesn't look as challenging to him as it does some other quarterbacks.
Do you think the run the damn ball crowd is going to be a little disappointed this year? Because I feel like a lot of the running game is going to turn into maybe the short passing game.
You know what the run the damn ball crowd ultimately is, Bill?
A lot of
it's a win the game crowd.
It is the win the game crowd.
And sometimes when you don't win the game, it's really easy to just say, well, if we would have just run the ball a little bit more. So the winning would cure all of that. I don't think run the ball guy is going to be too upset if Nebraska starts 7-0. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Winning cures a lot of things.
It does. Running might look a little bit different. And plus, I thought it was very fascinating back in the spring when Marcus Satterfield was saying that we have to be able to pass the ball. And he's not talking about 10 to 15-yard pass. No, 3rd and 4, they have to pass for first downs on 3rd down. Mm-hmm. And it's that intermediate passing game. So run the ball guy might be a little bit upset at some play calls, but then again, when you're watching college football, how many teams run the ball on 3rd and 5?
I would say very few.
A lot of them
Georgia
throw
Tech,
it.
Air Force maybe.
And if you have a quarterback, if Dylan Raiola is as good as we all think he is, you don't need to run the ball. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a nice change-up, and you can rely on the fastball, and the fastball is going to be some of the multiplicity in Nebraska's passing game. And they have better pass catchers, too. Oh, yeah. They definitely upgraded there. You mentioned Isaiah Nayer, Jamal Banks, and then you bring back a guy like Jalen Lloyd, Malachi Coleman, and don't leave out those tight ends. I think Nebraska's got an outstanding tight end room that not enough people are talking about because Nate Borkircher, he's a dude. Thomas Fedoni, just athleticism oozes when he is on the field. So they've got some players.
And then don't forget Carter Nelson, who's starting as a wide receiver. Maybe he grows into a tight end or what that looks like, but he's been mentioned, again, Foley mentioned him today, talking just about special teams. So he's a guy from Ainsworth there will likely make some noise as a freshman.
He will play.
So that's a lot of offense. Defense, though, would you say defense probably going to be the strength of this team, returning, was it 9 of 11 starters? I mean, that defensive line up front looks mean. Ty Robinson is a large man. Nash Hutmacher, again, is Nash. He wrestled in the offseason. Now he's back to football weight. Jamari Butler, I won't even try and say Principal's last name, but
Uman Mielen.
But would you say the defense probably going to be the strength of this team?
Obviously so. Yeah, I mean, they are chasing some very lofty goals. They want to be one of the best defenses in the country, statistically speaking. They want to stop the run. They want to get off the field on 3rd down, and they want to create more takeaways. They have the personnel for that to happen. They have to stay healthy, and that's the case on any side of the football. But the players that they're going to roll out on August 31st against UTEP, it's a pretty salty bunch. And it starts up front. Nebraska has so many options. We had a graphic that aired on the news in one of the recent sportscasts about all the different possibilities for Nebraska up front defensively. And the graphic allows 10 names to be listed. We were hoping to go 11.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's a great situation. So don't expect to see Ty Robinson on the field every snap or Nash. They will rotate guys, and they did it last year. And again, that goes back to that development piece. You get better by playing, and they're making sure some of these younger guys are playing. One of the big question marks on defense is really at the linebacker position. Who's going to fill in those spots vacated by Luke Reimer and Nick Henrich? And not only were they good players, they were also the captains of the defense, and they directed so much traffic. So let's see who slides into those roles for Nebraska. Certainly having John Bullock return this year, that's a great spot for Nebraska to start with at the linebacker position. And then they have some nice guys coming off the edge as well.
And they would have Javin Wright probably filling one of those spots, but Rule announces in this last couple days that he's out undetermined amount of time dealing with some sort of medical issue. So, but yeah, that will be a spot to watch. Secondary, though, again, you got a lot of names. There were some injuries from the spring game. Bly Hill, I believe, was one of the transfers that kind of came in. Again, came in from a really small college. I don't think anyone really expected him to really necessarily contribute right away, but he started in the spring game, I believe, and he's hurt, but he looks like he should be back. Maybe
he's working his way back, and he's been out there. He's getting work in. We don't know if he's going to be fully available for week one, but I would say it is trending that way, and he's going to be in the discussion in the defensive backfield as well. But that unit, you look at that: Malcolm Hartzog, Marquise Buford, Tommy Hill's having an outstanding camp from everything that we are hearing. And then they have some young guys that can mix in. What do we call Isaac Gifford? Is he a linebacker? Is he? He's just a guy on the field that's going to make plays.
Yeah.
Essentially, he would be a free safety,
Yeah.
or a safety of some sort.
Just lines up and hits someone.
He lines up and he plays like a linebacker, but they put him more in the defensive backfield.
One of the defensive storylines was kind of the abrupt resignation of defensive backs coach Evan Cooper. John Butler's hired within just a matter of days. He most recently coached with the Buffalo Bills. You have got a chance to interview him a couple times. The media's got a chance to see him. What have been your impressions with that transition to that new secondary coach?
One of my initial thoughts about John Butler, one, he's got a lot of energy, and it really works on that side of the ball. Because that's one thing about losing Coach Coop is like he was so youthful, and the guys really enjoyed him and his personality. John Butler, even though he's a little bit older, he still has the same amount of energy. And I tell you what, I don't know if you saw some video of him throwing some passes during practice. He can sling it.
He can.
That's one way to earn the respect of some young kids, is show how far you can throw the football. And he certainly has done that. I think one of my takeaways with him is, coming from the NFL, it seems like the transition from the NFL to college has not fazed him in any way, shape, or form. And that struck me, the fact that he can go from coaching professionals to coaching teenagers and young 20s. And it doesn't seem to be any different for him. And his ability to connect with the guys in short time. Because remember, he was hired with the season right around the corner. It's not like he got a spring season with them. He was basically on campus. And within the next couple of weeks, they were moving into the dorms.
Yeah, preseason camp was starting. So we kind of mentioned it, but obviously we think, defense probably the strength of the staff. Right before we jumped on here, Kevin, I'll put up the picture, but the Husker Football Twitter account dropped this image, which is the release of the new single digits. Again, I believe, if I remember correctly, this is voted on by the team, and these are the players that, kind of, you could almost kind of call them captains almost a little bit of the team, or leaders of the team, most certainly.
It's a big deal to get a single digit. They did it for the first time last year. I would say it's around the same timing, toward the back end of fall camp.
Yeah.
And it essentially awards the toughest guys on the team. And it's not just physical toughness, it is mental toughness as well. And I think if you're a tough guy, you have a leadership role on the team. So these are going to be the biggest voices. These will be the faces that you see at the podium more regularly. And, when things are flying, these are the guys that might pull somebody's face mask toward his and give somebody an earful.
Yeah.
Because coaches always say the best teams are the ones that they don't have to coach every single moment, that the players coach them. And so that's your group of Nebraska single digits. You see some returning guys. And honestly, before I started to evaluate, who were all the recipients, my eyes went straight to the right side of the picture. Ty Robinson is a
not quite
unit.
The same. He is a extremely large man. I think I would maybe get up to his waist, and that's about it.
No, you'd be surprised. Like, you'd get past his weight. But, like, his arms are enormous.
I mean, if you go to the middle there, I mean, or maybe, Marquise Buford, number 3 there.
Well, you're going from the defensive front to the defensive backfield.
I get, but, like, he is, like, at least 1.5 Marquise Bufords thick. So, it's impressive. So, again, returning guys.
It almost looks like there was a photographer, like a licensed professional photographer that lined him up. Like, smallest in the middle to the biggest on the outside.
You can't see the camera.
And now they're in numerical order. The only thing you needed to do was switch, 2 and 3 toward the middle. You get the point.
Yeah.
But instead they put the one offensive guy toward the middle, which is Jamal Banks. And I'm a huge fan of Jamal Banks. I said it from the first practice I watched him during the spring. I said, that guy's special. And he's number 4, the one in red, and that's your lone single-digit wearer on the offensive side of the football.
So, again, you have Nash and Ty, 0 and 9 there, that were single digits last year. You also have Isaac Gifford, 2, John Bullock, 5, and Deshaun Singleton, I believe, was also single digit last year. So kind of newcomers there. 1 is Jamari Butler, 3 is Marquise Buford, 4, Jamal Banks, 6 is Tommy Hill, 7 is Malcolm Hartzog. So, a good mix of all sort of levels of the defense there. And then, just the one offensive player.
Well, you can't put an offensive line. You can't have an offensive lineman with a single digit, but you would have believed, if that's possible in the rules of football, that a few of those guys would have been in discussion. Mm-hmm. Ben Scott, Bryce Benhart. I think that they're also going to be senior leaders on this team. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to throw this name at you, too. Micah Mazuka.
Heard from him today.
He's on his 3rd school in 3 years, having an outstanding camp. I'm expecting him to start on the offensive line for the season opener at one of the guard spots. Don't know if he'll go left or right guard. But I know Matt Rule and his staff have really been impressed with Micah. He's picked up the offense, and what did he say a couple times? Ain't scared of no one.
And he's
seen a lot of football.
He has. He's one of those players that kind of reminds me of Tommy Hill a little bit because, Micah Mazuka came in, and one of the first things we really heard about him from Coach Rule was that, like, well, hey, he needs to adjust to our standards. So it kind of sounded like, ooh, maybe this isn't a great fit. He's having some trouble. Ever since then, it sounds like he's been doing nothing but the right thing.
What's crazy is sometimes when you would hear that, the tones of, it's got to adjust to what our expectations are on previous staffs, sometimes you would hear that and then the player would kind of fade off. Mm-hmm. With Matt Rule, I can think of a few instances where they'll make mention of a player who needs to improve, get it to, like, I don't want to use the words get it together, but that's kind of the message that they are saying. Mm-hmm. And then you hear about him a couple weeks later and you're like, they're on the come.
Yeah.
So it's like this coaching staff is pressing the buttons, and I wouldn't put it past Matt Rule to use the microphones and the cameras to motivate a player.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's pretty simple to record it, show a clip, and say, like, I'm not messing around. Like, I will share this publicly to this very passionate fan base that you are not doing what we are expecting of you. And we need you to. And if you do, you're going to have some opportunities. Micah Mazuka could be a shining example of this. Mm-hmm. I know Tommy Hill, too. They did it with Tommy last year.
Yeah. So, So
and now he's a single digit.
So 11 days, 2:30 kick, UTEP, opening game. I believe it's on Fox, if I remember correctly. And so we'll obviously learn a lot. I would imagine it would kind of still be a little vanilla, though, holding some back for Dion in Colorado in week 2. So is that probably the game you're most excited for this season?
No. Because Nebraska plays at Ohio State this year.
That is true.
And the Horseshoe is my favorite place in college football.
It is an iconic.
So for me personally, like, Ohio State's great.
That'll be a good tweet.
Nebraska doesn't play, and Nebraska doesn't play there every year. So when a game in Columbus rolls on the schedule, I get pretty excited. And I am really looking forward to Nebraska, Iowa, on the day after Thanksgiving at night. I think
that will be different.
It could be a lot of cold, but I think under the lights it could be pretty fun. But I've never seen a night game at Kinnick, so there's a couple of road games that really excite me. From the fan base,
that'll be a lot easier to get to for the fans.
True.
Night game at Kinnick.
True. You have all day to drive over there and drink all of Iowa's beer. But anyway, like Nebraska, Colorado, I get it. Everyone is excited for that. The history, the rivalry, Coach Prime. Last year, the way that game unraveled for Nebraska, Colorado fans storming the field. And I even saw something just the other day of the 10 college football games that will likely have the highest viewership. And Nebraska, Colorado was listed on there. Plus, it's on the front side of the season. So, whether Colorado's 1-0 or 0-1, they open with a tough game against North Dakota State. And Nebraska presumably will be 1-0. I think that is going to be a great game. So many fans believe that is a must-win game for Nebraska. And I think they partly say that because it's personal to them and it's personal to the fan base. I get it, that is a huge, huge game. I don't know that Nebraska is going to be vanilla in week 1. I think 90% of college football is vanilla in week 1 because you don't have confidence in your full playbook.
That's probably true. That's
and you're still trying to work out, in-game situations, which players can you count on the most and which plays are you going to be leaning on when it's 3rd and 5? Which plays will you go to when it's 3rd and 21? I don't know that everything gets thrown out there in week 1, no matter if you're playing Alabama or UTEP. And most coaches typically say the biggest improvement within a season comes from week 1 to week 2.
So a lot to look forward to. Again, that home opener in 11 days. Want to shift gears on you really quick here, Kevin? Because, again, we got to mention volleyball because their season opener is before the football team. It's in a week. They're going to be taking the court against Kentucky. That's going to be in Louisville at the KFC Yum Center for a 6 o'clock first serve.
Side of the Final Four.
Yeah.
And it's the side of the very first game of the college volleyball season, which Nebraska gets to participate in. If you're a Nebraska volleyball fan, don't just watch that match. Mm-hmm. It's part of a doubleheader, which kicks off the college volleyball season. Nebraska plays Kentucky. Kentucky, of course, is coached by Craig Skinner, who used to be an assistant to John Cook. And then following that is going to be Louisville on the court, coached by, of course, Danny Busboom Kelly.
That's the AVCA First Serve Showcase, which should be some really, really good volleyball. But again, I think as you write the storylines, they kind of write themselves. Like you said, first match of the season there, and you could have your last match of the season there in the national championship match.
Well, that's
again,
the goal for Nebraska.
That is the goal. Again, this team is – last year's team was so good, but this year's team is just as loaded, if not even more.
Isn't this year's team the same as last year's team?
I mean, basically, yeah. You had a
yes,
couple
but
players
no, right?
transfers out. You had a couple players transfer in. And, I mean, there's always some of that subtraction, but then you have the transfer portal, and you get Taylor Landfair from Minnesota, who was I believe she was a first-team All-American a couple of years ago.
Big Ten Player of the Year.
Big Ten Player of the Year. So John Cook, he's got his horse, and he's got a really good roster.
I will say this. There's no volleyball day in Nebraska. But still, there is a ton of excitement around this team because it is insanely talented. There's also a fascination because Nebraska has gone into seasons with loaded rosters before. Mm-hmm. And in those situations, they have not won the national championship. 2007 comes to my mind first. I think it was 7 or 9. It all runs together. But the year where they had Sarah Pavin and Christina Hotelling on the same team, you thought, how will this team even lose? Well, They can lose. It's college volleyball. And that's where the magic of coaching has to come into play. Can you get these girls to trust the coaching decisions? Can you get them to completely bond? And what are those relationships like, especially when it gets in super competitive environments? My fascination with this team is, with all the talent they have, who plays? Somebody's got to sit.
Good problem to have.
But it could be a troubling problem because if some players are sitting that believe they should be playing, now you got some challenges. Mm-hmm. And that's where the selflessness and Nebraska's term of we fio with each other, for each other, that's that team first mantra that John Cook is trying to constantly preach every day in the gym. Even looking at those outside hitters, who doesn't play, Bill?
I mean, Lindsey Krause,
Harper Murray, Merritt Beeson, of course, is going to be on the court. Skylar Pierce is a freshman who's insanely talented.
Taylor Landfair.
Taylor, like you can't play 5 outside hitters at one time.
It's against the rules.
It's just not possible. And then even from a middle blocker perspective, Andy Jackson just played with Team USA and won a gold medal. not the Olympics, but the under 21 team, and they were dominant. And Andy was awesome this summer on the best team in this country. So you have Andy Jackson, you have Becca Alec, who is a returning. Is she a senior this year?
Becca Alec is a junior.
Okay, so Rebecca Alec is a junior this season, and that's the 1-2 punch from a year ago. But Layla Blackwell is now on the team. And Layla Blackwell did not transfer from South Dakota to sit the bench. And the first reports I heard of her when she had moved here and started training with the team was, my goodness, one, she's an awesome individual, very mature and, a glue girl, but she's also really good. So you have those three. Who's not playing? And when somebody gets assigned to sit the bench, can they be okay with it?
Yeah. This is it. I feel like this will be a team. When we look back at the end of the season, everyone's going to kind of just have their moments. Hopefully, that's what we see. There may be a 2 or 3 week stretch where it's Lindsey Krause and Harper Murray, and then a 2 week stretch where it's Taylor Landfair and whoever else.
John Cook loves to speak volleyball in the terms of other sports. If you watch his press conferences, he will reference NASCAR, he will reference football and third downs and quarterbacks and all that stuff, and he'll bring in just different terminology from other sports to try to explain as best as he can to the fans how his sport operates. And I'm wondering if it's crossed his mind to go with a Major League Baseball pitching rotation.
Yeah.
With the wealth of talent that Nebraska has, will he go to a middle blocker and say, you're in the lineup today, and you're going to play today? But then on Sunday, or whenever the subsequent game would be, you say, that's your day off.
Yeah,
Man, that'd be hard to do as a college volleyball player because they want to be on the court, and you get better with reps. And then you maybe would start saying, like, well, I'm playing against USC, but I'm not playing against UCLA, and I really wanted to play against UCLA. Like, how does it all work? That's the fascination for me.
It's going to be John Cook's office is going to be, I think it's that meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where he's got the board and all the strings. And that's what it's going to look like. Trying to figure out how to decipher that roster.
But what a problem to have.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
And the schedule, if you can't get excited about this Nebraska volleyball schedule, you're never going to get excited because they play 6 top 10 teams, I believe. Wisconsin's on the schedule. They're number 3. They'll play Stanford. They're going to play Kentucky. They're going to play Louisville. They're going to play Louisville on national television on a Sunday in September. That's awesome. So there is just so much intrigue even before you get into the Big Ten schedule for Nebraska. And every night is pretty much going to be must-see TV.
And then they have, with obviously the new additions to the Big Ten this year, they get Allie Batenhorst and USC at home. They get to make a trip out to Eugene. But the home opener at Devaney is going to be the Emeritus Players Challenge. So it's Friday, August 30th. Is when that kicks off. You could take in TCU versus Oklahoma, and then you could take in Nebraska and Texas A&M Corpus Christi in the evening.
Oh, yeah, and they also play Creighton. This is like third-page news. Are you kidding me? Nebraska owns the all-time series. They've never lost to Creighton, but the Blue Jays are one of the best teams in the Big East. The Conference Player of the Year returns to their lineup this season, and Kirsten Bernthal Booth believes her team is pretty good, and I think that they're pretty good.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't leave out Creighton in that discussion because that is the game, that is the match that they circle, and they've come close to Nebraska multiple times. And
last year, the year before, it was 5 sets.
It was 5 sets in Omaha a couple years ago.
Yeah, that was a good match. And I'll ask you, Kevin. I don't want to put you on the spot because I only saw the headline. But ESPN announced recently that I think they were making a major investment in sort of televising a lot of these volleyball matches. Do you know kind of any details on any of that?
Not off the top of my head. I've read about it, but it's not just promoting Nebraska, but you're going to start to see more college volleyball on network TV. So you'll see some weekend matches on ABC. You'll see college volleyball more on ESPN and not just the SEC network or the Big Ten network. It's going to be more on some of the flagship sports broadcasting television stations. ESPN started to take steps forward in that last year.
Yeah.
Last couple of years.
The national championship match, I think they put on ABC.
Correct, but I think this goes this isn't just a postseason thing anymore. This is a regular season. The profile of volleyball is getting bigger. And now some of these broadcasting networks, most notably ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, they're starting to pick up more matches to televise on a regular basis.
So might see, again, the Huskers on a couple of ESPN matches this year, something we'll obviously have to look forward to. So a lot going to happen here in the next week to 10 days, Kevin. We'll obviously have it covered here on 1011 on our on-air and online platforms. So
well, we have the single digits for Nebraska football announced finally today, because there was a lot of guessing of who was going to receive them. It kind of fell in line with what most people expected. Now we just need a starting quarterback named. It's going to be a formality. I would presume it comes this week. And then, next Monday, the conversation pivots to game week, UTEP, and then the exciting 3-month stretch that will be ahead for Nebraska. And if you don't know, there is already a preseason bowl projections out there.
There are. I've seen, I think, the Citrus Bowl against Texas.
Nebraska, Texas in the Citrus Bowl was the first one that I saw. There was another one.
It was in Nashville against LSU.
Music City Bowl against LSU.
Which, you look at either one of those. It's just
you know what both those tell me? Folks think Nebraska's going to a bowl game.
That's good.
That is good.
That is good. And that's something we can all look forward to. So we will obviously have all of that and more covered again. So make sure you keep it tuned to Kevin, Chase, and Kendall on End Report weeknights, again, 6 to 10. And we'll obviously have it all covered online as well. So Kevin, appreciate jumping in and hopping in and talking a little ball. We'll have another one hopefully for you again next week. But